Dr. David Johns has spent his life at the intersection of education, policy, and culture. He worked in the Obama White House. He currently leads the National Black Justice Coalition and recently launched the Teach the Babies podcast. In this conversation, we talk about what it means to lead without losing yourself. David shares what shaped his leadership philosophy, how he stays grounded in high stakes work, and why he's got Guard Your Joy tattooed on his arm. We also talk about allyship that actually means something, why community is a non-negotiable for life and for business, and what real inclusion looks like inside companies. If you're building something that asks a lot from you, you're really going to enjoy this episode. Let's get started with Dr. David Johns. David Johns, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Alex. Excited to engage with you.
Now, you have led and worked in some of the most high stakes rooms, if you will, in this country, working inside the White House, but also in policy, in activism, in culture. And I'd love to just kick off here to understand beneath all of that work and that hustle and the activism, who are you when you're not leading? Like, what does it feel like to be you when work is quiet?
Work is not quiet. I want to be clear in acknowledging that part of your question. And I'm going to erase it and I'll move the period before that part of it and answer who am I beneath the work? Because work, especially at this moment in our very young and fragile democracy's development, things are not quiet, quite the opposite. But I was recently at a dear friend's wedding, my sister's wedding. I was invited to MC and help to facilitate. They wanted to use my takeover, attention detailed energy to help curate the event. And coming back, my fiance Andre said to me, my most favorite moments are watching you smile, when you are supporting your friends, when you are reading or dreaming about what's possible, when you are laughing or being loved on by folks. And he made a reference to, I have twin nephews, Jet and Jax, who are 5 years old. One looks like me when I was his age and has similar personality traits. The other snatched his mother's face and some of her personality traits. And Andre often talks about me making, the two of us making similar faces. And I think beneath it, to use his words, I'm still a little boy from Inglewood, California, who grapples with what it means to be I used to say to my elementary school teachers, like, if I wasn't my dad's sperm that met my mother's egg, like, would I be this person? Would I think in this way? I'm still the person grappling with those questions who sometimes is met with or confronted by what at the time felt like control. So some teachers called me loquacious when they felt ill-equipped to engage in dreaming with or finding answers with me. And then other times I am supported by folks who show up now as guardian angels, who help to enable me to find ways to get closer to peace and be grounded. I'm a Pisces, so I'm often grounded by, or answers come to me, or I talk to my ancestors near bodies of water or in bodies of water. And so that is who I am beneath it, the little boy from Inglewood, California, trying to figure it out.
Yeah. And so how does it, that version of you, the maybe loquacious, maybe, but
no, I am. I get paid to run my mouth, is what I say.
Yeah. So how does that boy who's got the energy and the smile, like you were saying, so how does this then influence your public work, how you lead in public?
Yeah, I can pick this up where I ended, which is I'm the little boy from Inglewood, California, who appreciates that I didn't ask to be born. And my rage comes from a frustration around knowing that um, people make policy decisions that influence practice that often constrain the life opportunities of, again, children who don't ask to be born. As a child of proud African descendant, someone who is clear about my history, I'm very well aware of how those systems, by and large, disproportionately disadvantage people who look like me and come from the communities that continue to conspire for my success. The 92% of Black women who work to defend democracy, who are often called to do jobs that they aren't awarded or want to do. Um, and that awareness, coupled with what I accept as the place where my purpose meets my passion, enables me to compel people to produce answers to some of these questions, to design systems and policy solutions, and to support practices that are designed to disrupt those very problematic ways of being, and create new systems and strategies and practices and communities anchored by care. So I celebrate that I am incredibly privileged, and I've earned a lot of it, to be clear, to be able to um, do work and live in a way that is directly tied to um, loving on and providing answers to that little Black boy from Inglewood, if that answers
Hmm.
your question.
Yeah. And I mean, look, you're now executive director of the National Black Justice Coalition. You host the Teach the Babies podcast.
Mhm.
You've done a lot of your own consulting work. So you obviously wear a lot of hats and have a ton going on. How do you start to think about developing your own leadership philosophy, right? So call it conscious leadership, or what do you bring from yourself to your leadership philosophy when you're doing it well, when you're in your zone, when you're getting stuff done? Like, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I think two things. One is when I led the White House Initiative on Educational Excellence for African Americans, an initiative that was established by President Barack Hussein Obama to help to restore our country to its rightful place as a global leader by investing in educational opportunities for Black folks before birth through college completion and career entry. The thing that was most important to our office was disrupting the habit that people, that leaders, that in that context, specifically educators have of solving problems for people without engaging them in that process. In particular, really bothered me that so many educators would create space to have problem solving um, um, activities, exercises for students without inviting students themselves.
Ah,
And it bothered me for a number of reasons. One is students keep adults, especially their teachers, honest. And when we asked adults what they thought were the most important problems or challenges facing young people, and then asked young people the same question, young people have very different answers.
mm-hmm.
And so we worked in partnership with Johnson Publishing Company, Ebony Magazine. We produced a series of summits called AFAM Ed Summits, and they were produced at post-secondary institutions, to community colleges, four-year universities. And the one rule at every summit, regardless of different context-specific features, was that the only experts who got to speak on the stage in front of the White House still were students. And it uh, uh, allowed some adults, educators, superintendents, and others to um, highlight their ignorance. I could have awarded scholarships to students every time someone said I didn't know that they were capable of that. Um, uh, the very practice of supporting young people in naming problems, identifying resources, and implementing solutions allows them to develop the skills that we expect for them to need to know and demonstrate in this global 21st century economy. And so that the idea of centering in African liberation theology, they would say the least of these, or in sociology, the most minoritized, trying to get away from marginalized, because this is deficit based and identifies a person as a problem and not the system. But the point here is that by centering the people who are furthest away from power and accessing power by naming the things that are important to them and then being supported in identifying and implementing solutions, works in every context, especially in the space where I engage. I wanted to say play, but I don't want to minimize the importance of the work, especially now. But the space that I engage in policy, it is often my responsibility, whether it was working in the United States Senate Help Committee, Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, to center students who are most minoritized, again, to no fault of their own, or in the work that we lead at MBJC, centering Black people who are also multiple marginalized because they're members of sexual minority communities, again, to no fault of their own. And so I think that is at the core of my leadership philosophy, centering those who are furthest from power at the center of the work.
Yeah, what I'm hearing there is a real desire for engagement and involvement, and really hearing from the people who are having the experience, and like you were saying, talking to students versus talking to teachers, to really get a sense of what it's like to be them and what they're going through. How has any of this changed for you over time? How has your philosophy evolved?
I feel more strongly at my bigger age about centering young people in the context of education are people who are most often ignored or minimized than I did when I was that young Black boy from Inglewood, California. If only because I am clear that so many of the problems that feel seemingly intractable will only be solved when we do exactly that. Said another way, I'm clear about how power works. And the longer I am required to use my superpowers to solve for the worst parts of white mediocrity and white privilege, and the ignorance that comes from public education systems that are being destroyed by people who want to hoard power and are required to ensure that people are the opposite of woke. The more I'm required to do that, and fight to have time to love and be loved on, and guard my joy, which is tattooed on my arm, the more affirmed I am in something that I've always known.
So you have "Guard My Joy" tattooed on your forearm.
Guard your joy.
Guard your joy.
One forearm with a Basquiat crown, and on the other it says "Rumble, Young Man," which is, and then a reference to Ali when he changed his name to the Most High. So I guess we can add that to the leadership philosophy category of 2 and 3.
Right. Yeah. Rumble, young man. David, you've been pretty candid online, offline, about the toll that your work can take, and you obviously have huge amounts of work ahead of you on all the issues that you just talked about. And I know that it can hit the disillusionment, the exhaustion, frustration, the grief. So besides tattooing on your arm to guard your joy, how do you protect your peace and not sort of lose your heart in this, and stay engaged and keep up that rumble?
So I think in threes. The first one I wrote down is I let things wash over me. This isn't a me thing. One of my favorite books is this book by
Oh,
Michael
yeah.
Singer,
The Untethered Soul. Is that
The
the Untethered
Untethered
Soul?
Soul.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's one of those books I go back to at least once a year. And the principle of first acknowledging that I am not my thoughts, I'm the person observing them. And then feeling all of my feelings, but letting them wash over me and not become suffocated by them or drowned by them is something that is incredibly important to me. Um, and I think the sub bullet to that, if I were in my elementary school classroom, is this is when I would say to my students that real men acknowledge they have emotions. The triptych there was real men wear pink, real men acknowledge their feelings, and real men teach elementary school, because I needed to make that explicit. The second is I often retreat and draw strength from my community. I find myself saying a lot at present or frequently that I know one of the ways that the weight of the world, or in my case, one of the ways that fascism wins is by forcing us into isolation, or to thinking that we either have to do everything on our own, or that we cannot do everything, period. And so we should give up, we should capitulate, we should abdicate. The deep knowing that we are called to do something that only we can do, and if we don't do it, it won't be done. I think often about this is a sort of footnote. I would add Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s "But If Not" sermon that he preached at Ebenezer Baptist Church in November of 1963 here, because he preaches about the importance of knowing something so deeply that you are willing to die for it. And he makes the point that you'll be met by that thing at some point, and you'll know it. It will dwell deeply within you. It might, Oprah would say, or other folks will say, it'll start as a whisper, then it'll become a scream. And if you ignore it, and you met it at 33, I think he was when he was given the sermon. If it met you at 33 and you ignored it and you lived to 98, it wouldn't matter, because you died at the point at which you ignored doing the thing that you needed to know. The sermon is important because I know that no matter what the thing is, that you are going to be challenged by it. And to go back to being someone who draws strength in the lessons from recalling African ways of being, so many of us are required to do our thing in community. And so in this moment where, again, I think a lot about indwelling politics, and everything is political. I want to shatter the socially constructed myth that we shouldn't talk about politics. Politics affects every part of our life, often in incredibly intimate ways, too frequently without our consent. But what I think about is the importance of resisting the urge to want to pull back from people who you feel voted against your self-interest, don't have your best interest at heart, or any of the things that are righteous feelings in this moment. We are required to be in relationship, including with people who cause us pain, if only so that they are aware of it. And it's a challenging work, especially in the explicit place of politics, again, which affects everything. But for, to be clear about the space in which you've curated, for entrepreneurs, it's a similar thing, or a similar phenomenon. When you are doing a thing that only you can do, you got to build a team to hold you as you do it. And there will be times where those relationships and the ability to let someone hold you is tried, but we have to develop that muscle, because I don't think that we can do anything without doing it in a community that's fortified with love. I hope that was as clear in articulation that it was in my body.
Well, for a lot of entrepreneurs, it can also be really lonely out there, right? It can be tough. And so what I heard you saying there was, even when things are difficult, we have to reach out to those who may have hurt us, or there might be something going on, if only to let them know, to make them aware. And so part of this is communicating, speaking our truth, because a lot of entrepreneurs keep a lot of stuff bottled up, right? Keep a lot of stuff bottled up. Don't talk about whatever's going on, and that hurts them. It hurts the business. It hurts their families, their coworkers, the all of them, because they aren't opening and talking about this stuff.
Yeah.
And so, right?
Yeah, very much so. And imagine if one of three things could happen. One, if that person is unaware of the grievance, like genuinely unaware, not gaslighting, right? Like not playing the game that some people can play, especially adults, which is why I prefer being in the company of students. But imagine if that person was unaware, then there's an opportunity for growth and possible continued partnership. The second is, regardless of how they came to being reminded of their role and your feelings, imagine what happens if you can give them all of what you're harboring and holding, so they don't shift, right? So that they don't atone in the way in which you would like for them to. Reparations is not a thing that they're interested in. Imagine if you could let go of whatever lingering questions or desires you had in that exchange. You'd be freed up again and have energy to devote to developing new relationships or investing in whatever your business is. Why don't we just stop at those two? Because I always think in threes, and I think the third one will come up in another question.
Well, it's great. And it's funny. You pulled out your copy of The Untethered Soul a minute ago and said this is something you refer back to. And one of the main premises there is don't hold on to your feelings. Like have them, acknowledge them, they happen, but you're going to free up your own energy by simply acknowledging them and letting them go. Like that's one of the major things that I got out of that book, at least.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I see a sign there on the wall behind you that says "Nourish thyself." What does that mean to you?
That was a gift from a dear friend named Clarence, and I think it means for me to do the things that I know are required for me to be well, in spite of what the world is telling me in this moment. So it includes speaking truth to power, especially in moments that shake my soul, and acknowledging that it could invite very powerful forces that have been used to silence people who do the kind of work that I do to defend democracy or speak up on behalf of minoritized communities. It means to stand on business, as my students would say, or to be prepared to squabble up, to quote Kendrick Lamar, the awarded laureate. I am a 40-something-year-old man who is intentional in painting my nails. And this is a practice that I adopted because of a student who wanted a student who was assigned male at birth, because gender is assigned at birth. But he started to ask questions, why is it that only girls get to enjoy art on their nails? And essentially wanted to paint his nails, but would often talk himself out of it because he didn't want to be bullied. And that was an invitation for me to leverage my privilege, physical, with regard to my age and things I've acquired, including multiple degrees from Columbia University, to say, if you do it, I'll do it too. And if somebody gives you static, send them my way. And so in this moment where in our geopolitical environment, so many people are attempting to shrink and hide, not appreciating that there are no neutral spaces, I am intentional in continuing to nourish my soul by being disruptive and showing up in ways that my ancestors did. Another book that often comes up in conversation for me is Sambufu Some, who wrote the Spirit of Intimacy. Chapter 13 of the book is titled Homosexuality, the Gatekeepers. What they write is, in my village in West Africa, the words lesbian and gay did not exist, but the word gatekeeper did. They go on to say, most importantly, that gatekeepers hold the space between our ancestors and the village. I am aware of my superpowers and am required to do the things necessary to nourish and protect them, including sharpening my skills and finding joy in community, organizing in community.
And speaking of your superpowers and speaking of no neutral places, let's talk about Teach the Babies.
Mm-hmm.
This is a podcast of yours, fairly new. What inspired you to do this? I think the first season is about Brown versus Board of Education 70 years later. What inspired you to do this? And what, I almost like hate to ask it this way, like, what sort of reaction are you getting to this?
So I appreciate the question. Two things facilitated Teach the Babies, the podcast. One is it is my life's beseechment for all of us to teach the babies. There's a sociologist, Asa Hilliard, who says, I've never met a child, he would say in particular, a Black child who is not a genius. There's no secret to how we support them. We first acknowledge them as human, and second, we support them with love. And what I know over the course of my lifetime as a Black man, educated in public schools until I went to college, as an educator who was taught in elementary school and in college, as a sociologist who earned a PhD studying the experiences of Black LGBTQIA plus students in public, middle, and high schools, is that too often students who are not white, not cisgender, meaning that that their identity is consistent with that their internal identity is consistent with external expectations of people based on gender binaries. Cisgender people, whatever their gender is assigned at birth, they agree with it. Transgender people is the opposite. But people who are not white, who are not cisgendered, who are not strictly heterosexual, almost all of us find ourselves forced into spaces after we are born where we are not treated as humans, where we are not met with the kind of love that enables students to do the things that they are required to do. The root of the word educare, the Latin root of it, it means to draw out. Education and learning and developing is difficult by design, and it frustrates me, it angers me that too many of us, especially those in elected positions of power, whether that be at the school board or the governor's level or the White House or the Department of Education, fail to appreciate that, again, children don't ask to be born and they're forced into these spaces, and that they're not met with love. It incenses me. And so the thread through all of the jobs that I've had that, again, have enabled me to stand at the place where my purpose meet my passion, have been anchored by this beseechment for us to teach the babies. My grandfather, who's no longer here, was a Black Baptist preacher, and what he would say is that that's my ministry. The podcast, specifically in the way we structured it and launching it around the anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education, the first case that was tried, was, for me, an opportunity to remind us that so many of the opportunities we thought we solved for, we hadn't. So today, schools are more segregated now than they were when the Brown decision was made. And one of the desired outcomes of that case decades ago was that schools would be more integrated. What was lost in that decision was that integration wasn't the goal, that was a compromise, but that Black students would have access to the resources that were being hoarded by systems that were controlled for and really designed exclusively for the benefit of, again, white, cis, heterosexual, able-bodied, descendants of landowning. I can go down the list, but Brian Stevenson would say systems work as designs. Public schools in this country were designed for children of elite families. They then grew post-industrialization to be spaces where more of us were supposed to have access to the skills, relationships, and abilities to compete in this global 21st century economy. And now there are a small minority of incredibly wealthy oligarchs who are continuing to enrich themselves by denying people access to these opportunities. And I wanted a space to talk about it. And so throughout the first season of Teach the Babies, we get into conversations about the legal impetus for and outcomes for both cases, the consequences sociologically, physiologically, emotionally with regard to students who were caught up in it, both then when we think about Ruby Bridges and there were 3 little girls or 4 little girls who integrated a school in Louisiana, 2 schools in Louisiana that we talk about, and 2 as well. So we go through it, and now it is still anchored in that. But in season 2, we've grown to talk about what's required to defend democracy. So Ryder, bell hooks, and teaching critical thinking writes that too often children don't teach, or children are not taught, rather. They do not learn that democracies have to be defended by each generation. And education is its midwife, it being democracy. So in the spirit of that, we explore what democracy is, why it's important in its relationship to education, and then also employ Afrofuturism to dream beyond the constraints that exist in this moment now. Really excited. In May of this year, we'll launch season 3. And I encourage everybody to join us over there so they can learn more about what's to come. But thank you for that invitation.
Nice. And how's the reaction been?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I started to say the reaction has been positive, but then I wanted to hold space to say a counterpoint to Big from Inglewood, California, again, a cousin to Compton, is that I'm sure if anybody has anything disparaging to say, they know not to say it to me. So I don't know. Whatever the critiques have been, maybe they'll reach me in some way, shape, or form. But often I hear one of 2 things. Most recently, I was with someone who said to me that as a mother, it is a tool, a resource for them to advocate for their child who is in elementary school in a public school setting, and provides them with things to think about that they otherwise might not have considered. And there's something that comes up often also that is affirmation for me, is that it's a reminder that people who believe in the defense of democracy and the importance of equity, and not just inclusion, but expansion, that they are not crazy, that they are not alone, that there are others out there toiling, even though when we are in the arena, it can feel like it.
Now, you certainly are very clear. You don't mince your words when it comes to calling out, let's call it performative allyship, right? But I want to note that there's a lot of business leaders that I know. There's a lot of entrepreneurs I know who want to do the right thing. They want to build inclusive companies. They want to really harness all the energy that's out there. They want to not only say they do the right thing, but actually do the right thing. But they don't necessarily know where to start, or they don't know where the actual work in doing this is. And I would love to hear for you, like for an entrepreneur who's like, you know what, I do want to be on the right side here. I do have their heart is in a good place. They are wanting to, but they just don't know how, or they don't know the steps to take. Like how do we give them guidance here?
Yeah, Alex, I'm smiling because if this were a PBS episode, it'd be sponsored by the letter C for community, because that's my answer. And again, not to be funny, but this may be the elementary school teacher coming out fully. But when we are in community with people whose lived experience is not simply a mirror of ours, but a window into possibilities that exist beyond that which we know, have been taught to believe, or have been exposed to, we find these answers. Or at least we're exposed to people who can help us connect to people who can answer the question to us. And too often, leaders don't recognize the importance of investing the labor required to develop diverse and loving community before they need it. And so when they do engage in connecting with people who can help them answer questions, it's a relationship based on a transaction. Too often it's one where when challenged or presented with a competing priority, it drops. And so I'm going to go through three, but the first one is you need community. Leaders often fail. Autocrats often fail. I'm like motioning toward the the White House in this moment. Fascists often fail when they do things by themselves. One of the reasons why democracies tend to be more successful over the course of history is because there are systems where there is balance and shared both power and responsibility. I could go on, but the first most direct answer to your question for people struggling is to do so in community. I would often tell and still tell educators, when you are stressed or challenged to solve for something, invite young people, invite children into solving it with you. Do the same with your employees and folks in community. And I would underscore a point that I made previously, which is to center folks who you are most often least likely to center in that problem-solving case for folks who feel like, this might be too much liberal, social, progressive talk. This is how we got to airbags in cars that didn't kill people, because women were added to the engineering teams and the specifications were changed such that they were not simply all around the average body type for white men. That's my case there. The second, I mentioned it, but I want to draw it out, is to commit to staying the course. What we are experiencing now in this moment it are too many leaders who purported to care about certain values who could not wait to run away from them. Knowing that the question is coming up because it's a challenge worth confronting requires you that if you're going to lead and invest in whatever way you're going to invest after engaging in consultation with this loving community, that when challenges arise, you commit to staying the course. Otherwise, my request is that you don't even engage. Don't even engage. Similar, I want to be clear, I keep the same energy and will tell educators. We used to say silly things like teaching isn't rocket science. You're right, it's a lot harder. And students don't have a choice. They are forced by law to go to the schools that they're often parents, minimally, but policymakers decide that they're going to. Unless you have the money to buy out of that system, then you have a little bit more agency. But educators have the choice to do that job. If you don't want to leverage your leadership, your privilege to do things that are disruptive because you know they matter, come back to the other example. Investing in diversity, equity, inclusion, expansion, and belonging is important because it increases productivity, the way employees and people in a company and an institution feel, the bottom line around profit. If you don't want to do those things, don't tip your toe in the pool. Don't invest in a program. Don't invite a speaker. Don't host the ERG. Don't do any of it, because I would argue that the performative stuff is worse than you not engaging in the first place. This is why usually come May, the last week of May, when the corporations start engaging in pride pimping by putting rainbows and glitter in their windows to suggest that it is one of the worst ways that you can signal to someone that you don't care, especially when we can tell that you don't do anything any other point of the year. So the point here is commit to stay in the course before you engage. And then the third is, to this point of allyship, words matter to me. Allyship is like nails on a chalkboard. Too often, because entrepreneurs or corporate leaders are doing things because they want to receive an award, or they are going into a place and buying an Ally jersey and putting it on their LinkedIn profile. The goal should not be simply to be called an ally. You need to have some skin in the game. I want to know what you are doing to leverage your privilege to be disruptive in ways that improve life outcomes and opportunities for others. The goal should be active accomplishment. You can start at allyship. Let's appreciate, again, words matter. I don't want to say there's nothing there in terms of equity or importance, but that should be the floor. We should all be working wherever we are, whatever capacity, however we enter the arena, to be an active accomplice to these values and principles that we purport to care about and some of us live on principally.
Fantastic. That's great. That's great guidance. The guidance that I'm hearing is make a commitment. So this is not window dressing. This is something that we're doing, and understand the power of really being, of really doing this for the right reason and following through. And don't do it because we're expecting a pat on the back, a thumbs up, a like, a fancy banner around some social post, or some award. Do it because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, yes. And since we're in the space of honoring references to books, Brene Brown would say, we should work to be disaffected by the criticism or the praise. Right. So for entrepreneurs who are chasing awards and lists and external validation, know that if your value is bound up in that, it can as easily be ripped apart when there is a critique or attack on you, your product, your values, and now what you stand for. She, to extend this, would say, keep a note in your phone. At the time, this so dated. She would say she had a note card, an index card that she put in her wallet, but with the names of the people whose critique matters because they were in the gym shooting with you or were connected to creating the thing that is most important to you and your work or your purpose. Let that be an anchor for you when you have questions, but again, work to be disaffected by the criticism or the praise. Do it because you know that you need to do it. That goes back to the Dr. King sermon.
Fantastic. Well, hey, Dr. David Johns, thank you for being here. I really appreciate your message and the work that you do. Great to see you. And thanks for joining me on the Conscious Entrepreneur podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. I look forward to the comments from your community, from the community.
Sounds great.
Thanks, Alex.